Footage of Sean Diddy Combs in the days leading up to his arrest in New York last September, which is part of a new, highly anticipated docuseries by director Alex Stapleton and rapper and executive producer Curtis 50 Cent Jackson.
I think it was surprising that he actually filmed it.
It was very interesting to watch a man who's known for his brand presence. You know, he has a really amazing knack for marketing and all of that, and how he was sort of taking that into account and how he was coming off to the public.
Footage showing Sean Diddy Combs in the days leading up to his arrest in New York last September has become one of the most talked about elements of a newly released Netflix docuseries. The four-part project, directed by Alex Stapleton and executive produced by Curtis 50 Cent Jackson, immediately drew attention because it includes rare, unfiltered moments of Combs during a period when he was under intense legal scrutiny but still moving freely in public. What surprised many viewers was not just what was shown on screen, but the fact that these moments were filmed at all. Combs, a figure long recognized for controlling his public image with precision, allowed cameras to follow him closely at a time when the stakes could not have been higher. Observers familiar with Combs' decades-long brand dominance noted how unusual it was to see him operating without the polished insulation that normally surrounds him. He has built an image rooted in confidence, power, and careful presentation, making the raw tone of the footage particularly striking. Throughout the scenes, it becomes evident that he was still aware of how he appeared to the public, yet certain moments reveal cracks in that control. The documentary does not rely solely on commentary to suggest this. Instead, it allows extended footage to speak for itself, showing how Combs engaged with fans, navigated public spaces, and reacted when he believed he was no longer being watched. One of the most discussed moments takes place in Harlem, where Combs is seen greeting people warmly, shaking hands, and acknowledging supporters. The interaction appears routine at first, consistent with how public figures often manage fan engagement. However, the moment shifts after the crowd disperses, and Combs believes the interaction has ended. His demeanor visibly changes, and he makes a comment expressing discomfort, stating that he feels like he needs to wash because he feels dirty. This brief statement, captured unexpectedly on camera, became a defining sequence within the series. According to those involved in the project, this was one of the moments where Combs appeared to forget he was being recorded. The inclusion of this footage prompted questions about intent. Filmmakers were asked whether moments like these were selected to expose character rather than context. The response suggested that it was precisely because of how unlikely the moment was that it mattered. Few public figures, especially someone as media-savvy as Combs, would allow such an unguarded reaction to be filmed. That moment, according to the creators, offered insight into his internal state at the time. It was not staged, rehearsed, or reenacted. It unfolded naturally, and that authenticity is what made it relevant to the larger narrative the documentary aimed to present. As anticipation for the series grew, critics questioned whether the project was less about objective storytelling and more about personal animosity between 50 Cent and Combs. The two have been linked to long-running tension stretching back more than 2 decades, leading some to claim the documentary was driven by bias rather than balance. Addressing those claims directly, 50 Cent rejected the idea that the series was motivated by personal dislike. He explained that what some described as beef stemmed from long-standing discomfort with Combs on a personal level, not from a public feud manufactured for attention or ratings. 50 Cent described an early interaction in which he felt uneasy about Combs' behavior, stating that it felt like a form of testing boundaries rather than a harmless exchange. He emphasized that his discomfort was not unique or personal, noting that it shaped how he viewed Combs long before the current legal issues surfaced. However, he was clear in stating that the documentary was not designed as a retaliation project. According to him, the purpose was not to compile accusations or sensational highlights, but to present a wider story that included multiple perspectives, even those who were not critical of Combs. The series deliberately avoids focusing only on allegations or conflicts. The producers stressed that not everyone involved had accusations to make and that participation in the project did not require an adversarial stance. Instead, the goal was to create space for audiences to observe events, testimonies, and outcomes without being pushed toward a predetermined conclusion. The approach sought to separate storytelling from judgment, allowing facts, footage, and first-hand accounts to coexist without editorial distortion. A significant part of that approach involved including voices that had not previously spoken publicly. Among them were two jurors from Combs' trial, appearing on record for the first time. Their participation added a new dimension to the narrative, shedding light on how the jury arrived at a mixed verdict. Combs was found guilty on 2 prostitution-related charges while being cleared of racketeering and sex trafficking allegations. The jurors explained that their decisions were rooted in the specific charges presented, not in speculation or public opinion. Both jurors address a relationship between Combs and singer Cassie, a central point of public debate. Juror 75 described the relationship as one between 2 people who were in love, while Juror 160 emphasized that domestic violence was not among the charges they were asked to rule on. Their statements reinforce a distinction between legal accountability and moral interpretation, a separation the documentary repeatedly highlights. Rather than recast a trial, the series presents these perspectives as part of the factual record, inviting viewers to understand how decisions were made within the confines of the law. The question of Cass's position within the broader story became one of the most complex and sensitive areas addressed in the documentary. When asked directly whether Cassie should be viewed as a victim, the response presented was measured rather than declarative. It was acknowledged that Cassie entered the relationship at a very young age, around 18 or 19, and that age and power imbalance plays a critical role in understanding the dynamics that followed. According to the perspective shared, over time individuals can become conditioned to circumstances that initially might have seemed temporary or manageable. This framing avoids assigning intent while still recognizing vulnerability, emphasizing how gradual normalization can shape long-term relationships. The documentary does not attempt to redefine legal outcomes regarding Cass's involvement, nor does it introduce new claims. Instead, it focuses on inviting the audience to examine how perception, influence, and context may affect judgment. Viewers are encouraged to ask whether certain narratives received more credibility than others during the trial, and whether specific individuals benefited from assumptions that were never directly challenged in court. Rather than asserting answers, the series positions these questions as part of the viewing experience, highlighting how courtroom decisions are often shaped by more than just evidence alone. A recurring concern addressed in the project is whether the trial itself represented something larger than one individual. When asked whether hip-hop culture was effectively on trial alongside Sean Combs, the response was unequivocal. The argument presented was that remaining silent would have been far more damaging. Silence, according to that view, could easily be interpreted as acceptance or tolerance of alleged behavior. In an environment where no voices challenge or comment, entire communities can become associated with individual actions by default. By speaking publicly through the documentary, the intention was to separate cultural identity from personal accountability. The position taken was that hip-hop as a culture should not be required to defend or excuse behavior linked to one individual. Addressing the situation openly prevents harmful assumptions from taking root and reinforces the idea that no artist, executive, or figure represents an entire movement. According to this reasoning, commentary is not betrayal but responsibility, especially when public figures hold influence far beyond the music itself. Throughout the series, the tone remains deliberate in avoiding sensationalism. Even moments that could easily be framed for shock value are presented in context rather than isolation. This is particularly evident in how the documentary revisits pre-arrest footage. Rather than portraying these scenes as proof of guilt or innocence, they are shown as snapshots of a person navigating a rapidly closing chapter of his public life. The emphasis remains on observation rather than accusation, a decision that shapes the overall credibility of the project. The discussion eventually turns to how Sean Combs himself might react to seeing the finished documentary. When asked what Combs would feel watching the series, the answer was unexpected. Rather than predicting anger or denial, it was suggested that Combs might consider it one of the best documentaries he has seen. The reasoning behind this statement was not rooted in irony. Instead, it was based on the belief that truth, even when uncomfortable, retains value for those who recognize it. While Combs may disagree with specific segments or interpretations, it was suggested that he would recognize the overall honesty of the portrayal. That belief is reinforced by the idea that the documentary does not fabricate narratives or manufacture conclusions. It presents material that already exists, footage that was voluntarily captured, and testimonies from individuals directly involved in the legal process. Any discomfort resulting from the series is therefore tied not to distortion, but to exposure. The truth shown is not framed as entertainment, but as record, leaving the audience to grapple with what they see without guided emotional cues. The closing moments of the conversation around the documentary highlight why it continues to generate debate. Rather than resolving public opinion, the series seems designed to challenge certainty. It complicates simplified narratives that often dominate media discussions, particularly in high-profile cases involving celebrities. By including jurors, unedited footage, and direct responses to accusations of bias, the documentary positions itself as a broad examination of accountability, perception, and influence. As the series prepares for its global release on Netflix, it enters a landscape already saturated with opinion. Yet its approach distinguishes it from typical coverage by prioritizing documentation over commentary. It does not instruct the audience on what to believe or who to support. Instead, it assembles events, perspectives, and outcomes in a way that forces viewers to confront complexity rather than comfort. Ultimately, the documentary functions less as a verdict and more as a mirror. It reflects how public figures are seen, how justice is discussed, and how culture responds when influence and accountability intersect. Whether praised or criticized, its impact lies in its restraint. By resisting spectacle and centering factual moments, it ensures that discussion continues beyond the screen. When it begins streaming worldwide on Netflix, the conversation surrounding Sean Combs, his trial, and the questions raised by the series are likely to continue long after the final episode ends.